everyone, and thank you for joining us for The Real Deal on Form I-9. Before we get started, I do want to go over a few housekeeping items. If you are having any WebEx issues, please feel free to send me an email. It's Casey@directemployers.org. That's KACIE@directemployers.org. If you're having trouble with the audio broadcast, you may request a call-in by phone. You can click the Request Phone button on the event panel. It looks like a little phone receiver with a green question mark above that. You will be on mute today, but you can ask questions through the Q panel and the chat section of WebEx, and I'll read the questions aloud at the end. As always, this webinar is being recorded, and we will be providing that to all of our members in the pipeline at void@directemployers.org. If you are on Twitter and are tweeting during this session, please be sure to use #DEChat. And now I'd like to turn it over to our presenter, Dave Basham.
Okay, certainly appreciate that, Casey, and shout out to Direct Employers for inviting me to present on this very hot topic, obviously the I-9. We might be looking at another session throughout the year, maybe again on the I-9, maybe Verify, but we'll see exactly how this session goes and how your interest is within this subject. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into today's session. You see the agenda. I'm going to talk about the background of the I-9. Once again, my name's Dave. I'm with the actual USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, the division within USCIS that is home to not only the Form I-9 but also E-Verify. So we're going to just touch a little bit on the background, then we're going to jump into completing the form. I'm going to go block by block, give you instructions and some reminders, if you will, in regards to how to fill out each block. Some of the most common mistakes individuals make or maybe misunderstandings that you may have received by other individuals that may have trained you or passed on some other instruction. We'll look at the retention and storage of the I-9. How long do you store it? How long do you retain it after an individual is gone? And then we'll wind down with some resources. And as Casey stated, we'll handle some questions. So I encourage you to forward your questions throughout the chat feature throughout today's session. Bear with me. I'm a little bit under the weather today. I've been on vacation for about 2 weeks. I come back and I've got some congestion. So I'll try to be as clear as possible. Your slide here before you, yes, the I-9 was born in 1986. Specifically, anyone that was hired after November 6, 1986, you need to complete an I-9 on. We always get the question, well, Dave, we know the I-9 is a hot topic. What happens if we've had individuals that are hired back in 1983? We don't have an I-9 on them. Should we be doing one? No, for a lack of better terms, they were grandfathered in. Here, how the I-9 came about. In regards to IRCA, Immigration Reform and Control Act. Our look in regards to guidance on completing the I-9. I'll title that a number. Many of you may know it as the M274. You may wonder, where did they come up with that number? You'll see there in the last paragraph where the eligibility verification provisions and sanctions are found in Section 274 of the INA. Are individuals that may legally work in the United States. And the second group, the non-citizen nationals, we're not only talking about individuals such as from America Samoa, but also the Swan Islands. Just a quick reminder, what is the purpose of the I-9? Employability verification. To verify not only the identity, but the employment authorization of those individuals that, once again, that were hired after November 6, 86. Make sure you complete and retain the I-9 for those individuals that started work after, that you hired after November 6, 1986, and they're continuing to work for you now. I still have employers that will come up to me, whether it be a phone session such as this or a live session, and go, Dave, we thought we could shred or get rid of the I-9s after the 3 years. No, if they're still working for you, you need to have an I-9 on file. Now, if you're doing a self-audit or you realize that you're missing an I-9 on someone you should have one on, I'm going to talk about in a future slide here in just a minute what to do in regard to when you're missing an I-9. sure that you have an I-9 on file for all those employees that you had hired after November 6, '86, and they're still working for you. We'll also go over what do you do with the I-9 after an individual has left. How long do you retain it? We'll talk about that under the retention slide here shortly. And obviously, as the last comment states there in the slide, refrain from discrimination. So in discrimination, you see here are 4 types of unlawful conduct, whether actual or perceived, and who monitors those provisions? The Office of Special Counsel. I refer to them through today's session as OSC. They're within the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, Office of Special Counsel. We do many presentations with them. We webinar with them once a month on employee rights. Any conferences, national conferences, we do presentations side by side with the Office of Special Counsel. We're kind of tied at the hip when it comes to this topic. Why? As I stated, we're home to the I-9 and E-Verify, but it's the Office of Special Counsel that emphasizes those anti-discrimination provisions. So again, we're somewhat tied at the hip. Why did we add this slide into our presentation, which is from the Office of Special Counsel? Why? Look toward the bottom of the slide. There's numbers of contact where you can contact OSC both as employers, but look at the second one. The first one is employees. The second one, employers may also contact OSC. 1-255-8155 number, jot number down. Or don't worry about taking copious notes, trying to write all these slides down, because remember, after the session, Katie's going to be more than glad to send this PowerPoint out to each one of you. At least the number down from slide number 7. If you feel heading into today's session that you wonder, hey, are we treading on that line of discrimination on how we conduct the completion or give direction to the new employees on providing documents in regards to the I-9 and or E-Verify, and you feel be touching that area of discrimination, you can pick up the phone, remain anonymous, call the Office of Special Counsel. It's an anonymous call. When you call that number, they have their attorneys and their investigators that rotate on that helpline. When they pick up the phone, they don't want to know your name, your number, your next code, where you're calling from, your business, any of that. Simply ask your question. As many of the attorneys that I speak with around the country are always asking me, Dave, are you pushing our customer care hotline number? Because they would rather help you on the front side than meet you in the courtroom. They're sitting at one table with your employee and you're sitting at the other table. Utilize their services. They're free. I can't stress that enough. Before we get into the Form I-9, which is the current version you see on the slide before you here, yes, it's 2 pages now. It's coming up on 3 years old now. Let's go a question to you and answer to yourself. How many pages when you run off the I-9 are there? In a complete I-9, there's actually 9 pages. The first pages are instructions. Pages 7 and 8 are what you see on the slide before you. Page 9 is the list of acceptable documents. You're providing all 9 pages to your new hire. Now, don't fret. I can hear some of you through the phone, although I can't. If we're going to run off 9 pages every time for a new employee, does he know how many people that we hire each week or each month? Recommendation. We hand the 9 pages to the new employee. After they're done, hey, do you want to keep these first 6 pages, this instructions, or page 9, that list of acceptable documents? I have to say that very few, if any of them, will keep those. I know there's always that one. And if where they don't want those, why don't you just pull those back, hold on to those, and marry those up with the actual portion I-9 needs to be filled for your next new hire where you're completing the I-9. But you should be providing all 9 pages. Additionally, all the slide here before you shows pages 7 and 8 where there are 2 different pieces of paper. You can copy them front to back. And the only thing you need to file out of the 9 pages are what you see here before you. The portion of 9 that needs to be filled in. So on this slide, I-9 on file for all your current employees. The only exception, and we touched on this a while ago, employees you hired on or before November 6, 1986. Remember, they're graded in, if you will. But look at that last paragraph. Let's talk about that for a second. First, we're about, for those of you that may be familiar with the term, a remote hire. Remote hire, let's say, and I'm just using it as an example here. Just an example, Casey's in Tennessee, and let's say Casey hires me, and I live in Virginia, and I'm going to be her firm's sales rep in the Northern Virginia and D.C. area. Calls me up, offers me a job, I accept it, but he says, hey, Dave, we're not going to fly you here to Tennessee to fill out your onboarding paperwork. We're going to send that to you, and maybe part of that packet, there's going to be an I-9 in that form. You know, Casey can send me to anyone she wants. Section 2 of the I-9 on her behalf. Let's go back to that paragraph and read that. You delegate the authority to complete the I-9 to a responsible agent. However, you retain the liability for any errors. Casey could have me go to, maybe it's a friend, a family member. Maybe she has another office in the area. Send me to an attorney, a librarian, a notary, anybody she wants to, but retains the liability for any errors that that individual who's completing Section 2 on her firm's behalf still is liable for any errors. You're required to complete I-9 for these individuals on the slide here. Talking about that second comment there, the independent contractors for set work hours, we're not just talking about, a construction firm. Maybe it comes to your home or your building to build an addition onto your home, or et cetera. Many firms today hire individuals, consider them contractors. I like to refer to them as those 1099 employees. Although the payroll community is very quick to correct me, going, Dave, they're 1099 vendors. But I think you know what I'm talking about. Now, I'm telling you, every single one of those 1099 individuals you're not required to complete a 999 on, because it really gets down to your HR directors, your legal counsel, of truly defining what is the true relationship between that individual and your firm. I'm going to use the term the United States today, as you see down below the bottom of the slide. I'm talking about the 50 United States, the District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands. They're also referred to as the CNMI. They're located very near Guam, and they were federalized back in 2009. The acceptable documents on this slide, this is actually page 9 of the I-9 when you run that off. I'll tell you, from the previous version of the I-9 to the version, there were no new documents that were added on, nor were there any taken off in comparison to the previous version. But we did add 2 bits of information on this list of acceptable documents in comparison to the previous version. It's not new information. It's just we have questions that would come in, whether it be on our customer care line or emails or through webinar questions, etc., that we decided, hey, when we put the version of the I-9 out, that we would add that information under there. Where is it listed? The first one is List A, number 5, with non-immigrant, alien, authorized to work, etc. We just added some additional information. Once again, it's not new. It's listed in the M274. We just listed it there to assist both the employee and the employer. This area we added some additional information was under List C, number 1. Many of you may have run across an individual that may provided a Social Security card for the list of as one of the documents for the I-9. And how many of you have seen that Social Security card where it may have some writing not to be used for work authorization, or unless there's something else attached, etc.? We added some additional information under List C, number 1. Once again, it's not new. It's listed in the M274. to assist both the employer and the employee. This has come out in the past couple months, and we want to make sure you, the employer, are aware of this, that there are some green cards being issued, words signature waived in place of the lawful permanent resident's actual signature. So if you see one of those and it says signature waived, don't automatically assume, oh, this is a fraudulent card, I can't accept it. Be aware of this, okay? We're going to see one of our resource pages toward the end where we have a customer care number that at any time you have any question on I-9 or E-Verify, whether it's a general question or maybe it's during the process of completing an I-9 or you're doing a self-audit on your I-9s, you can pick up the phone, talk to one of our live representatives, question once again on the I-9 or E-Verify, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. your time zone. Offices are located in Buffalo, New York, here in Washington, D.C., Lincoln, Nebraska, and Los Angeles. So for each section of the I-9, I told you that the I-9 is made up of two separate pages. Page 1 is Section 1, page 2 is Section 2 and 3. Now, within the first page of Section 1, there are three subsections. Here's the first subsection, the employee information. The next subsection, which is in the middle of the page, is the employee attestation. It's those two subsections that are completed by the employee. Only responsibility as the employer is to ensure that the employee completely and correctly fills out these sections. You're not verifying any information in these sections, meaning here in Section 1, if an individual places their Social Security number, after they've completed Section 1 and they hand the I-9 back to you, you can ask, hey, I need to see your Social Security number to validate that that is, in fact, your Social Security number. You're not verifying in documents in Section 1. Where you're verifying documents is based on the documents they provide you in Section 2. I know several of you may go, well, now hold on, Dave. If they have a Social Security number in there, yeah, we want to see their Social Security number to validate that that's a correct number because we need that for payroll purposes. I understand that. But other policies or procedures or needs for documents or validating documents for other purposes outside the I-9 with the rules and the regulations of the I-9. Yeah, you need to validate the Social Security number when they're filling out that W form for IRS. That's fine, but you don't do that on the I-9. Not one. Over each line here, you see the first line, first name, middle initial, other names used if any. That other names used if any, that's an optional field. Look at line. That's street number and name. You had street number and name on that. Why? Pieces are not allowed. I said, hold on, Dave, in our part of the country, we only have P.O. boxes. No, I can tell you, an individual can go to the police station, fire station, sheriff's office, and you can find out the actual street number and name of that residence. Now, I bring up this topic only because it's been asked me more than a dozen times over the past couple months. I'm not making light of it by any means, but it is a very good question. Dave, we've hired individuals, and they tell us they're homeless, and they don't know what address to put into various forms we provide them. What do they put in the I-9? On our web, we have a website just for the I-9. It's called I-9 Central. You might want to jot that down, I-9 Central. You'll get that web link here on the resource page here shortly. It's a one-stop shop for everything on the I-9. And in I-9 Central, we have some FAQs, frequently asked questions. And it's in that area there. It tells you the individual, if they're homeless or something along that line, in that address block, as long as they can explain where they're residing as of that day they're completing Section 1, it's good to go. Example, an individual that's homeless might be living underneath the bridge of, let's say, I-95 and Main Street in Frederick. They might be living behind Earl's Hardware Store on Maple Street, as long as they can explain where they reside. And it's where they're residing that day. You might hire an individual, and they tell you, hey, I'm going to be moving to another home, another address next week. What address do you want me to put in there? It's the address as of that day they're completing Section 1. The next week or the next day or whatnot, they don't have to come in, and you don't have to correct that. So I'll discuss that address just a little bit more for you. Apartment number, if it's applicable, city or town, state, the zip code. Look at the third line, date of birth. Look at the format now. It's different than the previous version. 2-digit month, 2-digit day, 4-digit year. I'm sure every one of your new hires are put in exactly in that format, aren't they? I know I was joking there. They're not putting it in exactly in that format because I refer back to I-9 Central. It tells you that as long as the date that they put in that block there is easily recognizable, you're good to go. So if they're not put in that format, don't worry about calling them in and having them make a correction. Is the date easily recognizable? If it is, you're good to go. Look at the Social Security number block there. What's on this block versus the previous version of the I-9? Well, in the previous version for the Social Security number, it was just one big open block. But look now, we have 9 individual blocks. Why did we do that? Because we had many employers, such as yourself, calling going, hey, we have employees that are only putting 5 or 6 digits in for their Social Security number. Figured, hey, we'll fix that. We'll put 9 individual blocks. A common question I'm receiving on the I-9, this version, is the 2 blocks you see here toward the right. The email address and telephone number. They're optional fields. They don't have to be filled in. Neither have to be. Both of them can be, one or the other. Why do we add them? Question I receive. And I'm using that, let me go back to the example with Casey. And by the way, Casey's going to be my assistant. She's going to hire and fire me throughout the session with some of the examples. But let's say Casey there in Tennessee, let's say that I lived right there in Tennessee and her firm is going to build a big new shopping center that's about 2 hours away from her current office. When she hires me and I come in, and maybe we complete all my onboarding paperwork and any briefings or whatever on that first day, and after I'm done and we complete the I-9, I leave her office. She doesn't see me again for maybe a year or two because I'm going to be out at that job site 2 hours away. Complete the I-9 on that day 1. Maybe the next day, over staff, the I-9, check that I-9 to make sure there weren't any mistakes. And if there are some issues that they need to just speak with me about, if I placed my email address and or my telephone number, that's just another means for Kate and her staff to reach out to me. But optional fields. Heard me already say several times optional fields, and it's not a mandatory field, such as that on the first line, our names used. You know, Dave, if they don't put anything in there, what do they need to put in there? To draw a line, do they put in a, etc.? That's one question that I never answer on NAR's live presentations. Why? Because I want you to run off the I-9, run 9 pages. Everyone that has hands in the I-9 process within your firm together, and just review that. Specifically, review the 2 pages of the instructions, and it'll talk about block by block what to fill in each block. And I can tell you, if you have that highlighter, there's 6 different areas where it tells you, don't put anything in here, you can put in a, or you may put in a. Highlight that. I can tell you there's one area, which is in Section 2, which, by the way, Section 2 is your baby, is the employer to complete. If it's left blank, you must put in a. See my rhyme and reason here why Dave doesn't tell you exactly which blocks what, because I want you to review that. I look at the actual I-9 with anyone that has their hands in the I-9 process within your firm. Bottom of the slide, you see the employee complete Section 1. Remember, all you're doing is the information has been completely and correctly filled out. Here's the Middle of the first page, this is the next subsection, the employee attestation. The employee fills this out too. You can see in those red blocks where we pretty much what we want to highlight and speak about here on this slide. Individual selects one of those four categories. Just always get it when I make presentations with our sister agency, ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement. Why do presentations with them? We, USCIS, we develop the I-9, and we're the home to the I-9. We make up the manual, we give the webinars, presentations, et cetera. But it's our sister agency, ICE, that does the I-9 audits. And we do presentations with them around the country. Many times, some of their ICE agents bring their audit with them, and I meet with them, and I speak with them, and I ask them, hey, what's some of the wildest things you're seeing on the I-9 audits? And I get a chuckle when they tell me about individuals that attest to being 3 blocks there. I'm a citizen of the United States. I'm also a non-citizen national, and I'm a lawful permanent resident. We're off 1 block. I asked, well, Dave, wonder if they check off more than 1 block. What do we do? Remember, what did I tell you is your responsibility while the employee's completing Section 1, those subsections, that they completely and correctly fill it out. So if they check off more than 1 block, they hand it back to you. You simply hand it back and say, hey, you can only attest to 1 of those blocks. I'm going to talk to you about how to make a correction in a second. Okay. See that 3D barcode off to the right? You're going to see that not only in the first page of the I-9, but also on the second page. Don't worry about it. No need to do. You don't need a line through it. Do anything. You may ask, well, then, Dave, why did y'all put it in there? And you know, that's a great question. The food chain way above me knows somewhere down the line that we want to use this 3D barcode, but we're not right now, and there's nothing that you need to do with that. You see in the highlighted red rectangle block the signature of the employee and their date. Once again, you see that 2-digit month, 2-digit day, 4-digit year format. But as I stated a while ago, as the date is easily recognizable, they're good to go. The last comment on this slide. Let's talk about that. Always must complete Section 1 no later than the first business day where they start working for pay. Several of you might say, well, whoa, I thought we had 3 days to complete the I-9. I'll talk about Section 2 here in a second, but we're talking about Section 1, which is completed by the employee. So the employee needs to complete Section 1 no later than the first day they start working for pay. Now, this question, when earliest that you can complete an I-9 on an employee? You know, it can be working for pay. The answer to that is once a position has been offered to an individual and they've accepted the job, any date from that date, but no later than the first day they start working for pay, that can be completed. Now, that's a mouthful, so let me give you an example. Called and offered me a job of employment on 15 January. Hey, Dave, how would you like to on the 15 January? Dave, in your position to be our sales rep on the there. And accepted the job. Because, Dave, hey, for payroll purposes, we're not going to have you start working until 1 February. I go, okay. In this scenario, I live right there in Tennessee near Casey's. So today, remember I was called and offered and I accepted the job on 15 January. I'm not going to start working for pay until 1 February. Maybe here today on 27 January, I bounce into Casey's office just to meet and greet everyone. And while I'm in there, Casey says, hey, Dave, how would you go ahead and complete some of your new hire paperwork and maybe one of the forms of the I-9? Can we do that? I'm not till 1 February. Yes, we can. Why? I already accepted the job. So we complete the I-9 right here today. So you can complete the I-9 before they start working for pay as long as the position has been offered and they've accepted the job. Bottom of the first page, the prepare later certification block. This is not completed by the employee. When this is completed, it's pretty much defined in the title, is if you have to help someone prepare the I-9, or the I-9 needs to be translated to an individual, whoever prepares the I-9 or has to do the translation needs to complete this block right here. An example. Today, when I bounced into Casey's office and we were going to complete the I-9 and some other hire paperwork, hey, Casey, kind of hurt my hand playing basketball with my granddaughter last night. Right, if I tell you what to write in there, can you write it? Casey can do that. I can write up there in Section 1, but she needs to complete this Prepare Translator Certification block. If individuals help and translate the I-9, excuse me for a second. When they would this block. A kind of received out of this block is, Dave, can an individual be the preparer and or the translator here in Section 1 of this block, the certification block, but also be the same individual that completes Section 2 for the company? Yes, you can. Translation, let me ask you this. I always ask this. How many lines can be used in the U.S. today? One. Two. There's one in English and one in Spanish. Now hold tight. One Spanish can only be completed by us in Puerto Rico. But that's not to say that you can't use the Spanish version as a translation tool to assist buyers of yours that maybe Spanish is the primary language. There is an English and a Spanish version, but the only time you can put pen to paper to complete Spanish version of the I-9 in Puerto Rico. To the second page of the I-9, page 2 of 2. That's Section 2 and Section 3. Yes. When the version of the I-9 was in draft form, about 5 months before it actually went live, the verification division that I work in, and there's several hundred people, they pulled 6 of us, and I was lucky enough to be one of them in a room. They showed us this I-9 and asked us to make some comments. As other subject matter experts on the I-9 and E-Verify, I asked myself, well, I think employers are going to make the most mistakes on this new version of the I-9. Now, this is not USCIS data. This is simply Dave speaking here. It's right here up top of this page right here. Because the employer need to write down the last name, first name, and the middle initial of that employee. Well, I think employers were going to make that mistake the most. Why? Because they never had to do that before. Remember the portion. You still see here on this version of the I-9, we still have list A, B, and C. Look at list A. 3 blocks now instead of 2. Why? For those of you that may be working with colleges, universities, institutions of higher learning, if you will, you're familiar with what's called the CVIS number. That's where an individual from another country can come into our country and go to school. There may be a combination of 3 separate documents there to make up a list A. Version, we just had 2 blocks. So, under that situation, we're having to make, if you will, an ad hoc third block. So added that third block there. The common question that I receive out of that list A, B, or C portion there is the second line in each one of those blocks, the issuing authority. Do we use abbreviations? Well, let me do this. First, let me give you what I call the Washington, D.C. answer. You can go wrong if you totally spell out whatever trying to abbreviate. Give you reality. In the sense of completing the I-9, if an individual uses the abbreviation SSA or SSN, it's a fair assumption that's Social Security Administration, Social Security number, maybe their card or whatever. I agree with that. I'd see no problem with using that abbreviation. But if you're going to use an abbreviation when you're filling out that although the abbreviation may be very common in your industry, your state, your part of the country, but not everywhere else, be very leery of using that abbreviation. Here in Virginia, like a handful of other states where we get our driver's license, it's called the DMV, Division of Motor Vehicles. But, it's not DMV in every state. Very careful with that. I think you see where I'm going with that. You see that 3D barcode remember, just as I stated on the previous page, don't worry about it. You see the over there, that's the area where you're going to put the date the employee starts working for pay. And yes, you can put a future date there. I gave that example a while ago. Came for me a position on 15 January. She said, I'm not going to start working for pay till 1 February. Although I've been in her office today, the 27th, maybe I filled out Section 1, dated it the 27th of January. Maybe my documents today, she completed Section 2. She signed that she saw those documents today, 7 January, but in that area that's circled there, you can put that future date I'm going to start working, which is 1 February. Now, questions that I received in regards to that comment there. Well, Dave, if you're saying we can put a future date, the start date there, is there a limit on how far in the future we can put that date? No, there's not. Yes, for the professors or hospitals, maybe with their surgeons, that might hire an individual. Let's say a college might hire a professor right now to instruct a course, maybe the summer term, right in the end of May, beginning of June. They might hire them right now. The acquisition, maybe this is right in that area. Accepted the position, maybe they fill out the I-9. The first day they're going to start working for pay, maybe it's the day after Memorial Day in May. You can put there. The next question I get is, Dave, if we do put a future date in there, say when that date comes, the individual is sick. Start that day. They don't start working for pay. Maybe they start a week later. What do? You can make a correction line through that date, okay? Over to the left-hand side, let's talk about this for a second. The Section 2 is completed by you, the employer. Section 2 must be completed no later than 3 business days after the employee starts working for pay. This 3-day rule here is completed by the employee no later than the first day they start working for pay. You, the employer, have up to 3 business days after the employee started working for pay to complete Section 2. Or you got 3 days after they start working for pay to get a copy of for them to show those documents. Now, find that a little bit more. Each firm is open Monday through Friday, closed on Saturday and Sunday. The day I start working for pay is Monday. What day that week does the I-9 need to be completed? And the definition of a completed I-9 is Section 1 and 2 are completely filled out, signed, and dated. What day? And members go, well, Dave, that's easy. If you started Monday, you said 3 business days. That's Monday, Tuesday, by close of business Wednesday. The actual answer is Thursday. Go back to that paragraph there. Must be completed no later than 3 business days after the employee begins work for pay. 3 business days after Monday. 2 Wednesday, close of business Thursday. And it's your business days. The example that Casey's firm is closed on Saturday and Sunday, let's say the first day I start working for pay is a Thursday. What day then would the I-9 need to be completed? That would be Friday, Monday, Tuesday. Because remember, closed on Saturday and Sunday. Another question to be asked by employers. Well, Dave, if our office right here in this part of town, we operate 6 days a week. Headquarters, about 4 miles down the road, they only work 5 days a week. Which do we go by? You set that policy, whatever you want to do. But once you set, you make sure you're uniform and you're completing all your other I-9s. I can tell you from an auditor standpoint, I can't speak as an auditor. I can't speak for ICE, but I can tell you because I work with so many of them that uniformity is the key. What you do for one, you do for all. Going to the left-hand side, a couple more of those comments. Original documents. When an individual shows you that list of acceptable documents from list A or C, have to original documents. Can't be any copies. There's only one document where you can accept that can be a certified copy, and that's a birth certificate. Other than that, they all have to be original documents. And as you see in the last comment there, documents mustn't be unexpired. You can accept an expired document. Okay, in documents, we expect you to be a document expert. Don't get on this webinar and go say, hey, we need to turn that closet into one of those infrared document check-in rooms. The order says, as you see in that second there, you must be presented by an employee if it reasonably appears to be two things. Does the document look genuine, and does it relate to the individual? If it meets that test, you must accept it. Now, when I give a live presentation, I get hands that shoot straight up. Now, hold on, Dave. That's just not my first rodeo. I've had extensive training in fraudulent documents, and our policy goes up and beyond by saying blah, 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 blah. Look at the sentence there in the slide. You must accept if yours is genuine and relates to the individual presenting. If your policy goes up and beyond that, remember that number for Office of Special Counsel I talked about? Remember the discrimination? It'd be one of those policies, if yours goes up and beyond that, that you might want to call them and run that through them, okay? As you see down at the bottom, again, the documents must be original, no photocopies. The only one accepted is a certified copy of the birth certificate. Look at receipts for a second. Some of you have dealt with a receipt, and you've accepted a receipt as a list of acceptable documents. Some of you may go, I don't know what that is, Dave. Well, look at the very first sentence there. Receipts may be used as, here's your key words, temporary proof. Employment eligibility when a list A, B, or C document has been lost, stolen, or damaged. That means they had the document had already been issued to them. Somewhere on the line, it was lost, stolen, or damaged. Real simple, about 2 or 3 years ago, I lost my Virginia driver's license. Don't know where I put it. So I had to bounce into the DMV, the Division of Motor Vehicles, fill out the form, paid the $20. The young lady then ran off a receipt and said, Mr. Basham, until we mail you your driver's license within the next week or so, here's a receipt that you can show as proof you have a driver's license. I could have bounced out the DMV that day, went across the street to a Subway, a restaurant, and just use it as an example. They were hiring right there on the spot. They needed somebody to start right away. We completed the I-9 right there. I could have showed my Social Security card and my receipt for my driver's license. They have to accept that for my license. But it's temporary proof. Let's go to the slide. The receipt they're all providing you is issued by the originating agency. If you can tell it's a driver's license receipt that they're providing you, but the header says from the Department of Defense or from the University of Houston. Well, Houston, we might have a problem, right? There are to this 90-day rule I'm about to talk about. That's the next comment. So you accept a receipt, it's proof, completing A or C document, and you write receipt there. 90 days from the date that I started working for pay, if I showed you the receipt, I need to show you the actual replacement document. There's 2 exceptions to the 90-day rule, and it's right there on the slide. If I give that Subway manager my receipt for my driver's license 90 days from the day I started working for pay, he or she can come to me and go, Dave, you showed me that receipt for your driver's license, and we're coming up on about the 90th day. I need to see your driver's license by that 90th day. And if I can't provide that actual driver's license, they terminate me. Well, remember, the receipt is temporary proof. Last comment or two. A receipt indicating an individual has applied for the initial EAD card or the renewal of an expiring EAD card. You get those. And you can never accept a receipt in less than 3 business days. Document slide. Hey, you can read this whole block, or you can remember this. You make a copy of every document that's shown you, or you don't make any copies at all. It's one or the other. Dave, we didn't used to make copies, but now we want to start making copies, but we're concerned somebody's going to holler discrimination. Hey, you're making copies of mine. You hired a friend of mine 3 months ago. You didn't make their copies. Hey, simply do a memorandum for record, a memorandum for file. hey, effective this date for purpose of the I-9, we are going to start making copies of documents filed away. You get an audit, that comes into question, pop that memo out, end of story. And the same goes for if you used to make copies and you want to stop, memorandum for record. Okay, in documents. Where do you keep those copies? Wherever you want. We recommend that you keep the copies with the I-9, but you can keep the copy anywhere you want. Okay, here's the last section on the I-9, Section 3, it's Reverification. The bottom talks in regard to when do you out Section 3. The first comment there, you must find employees in Section 3 if their temp employee authorization has expired. Maybe at the time that you hired them and they showed you a document, maybe they showed you an EAD card, an employment authorization card. Here it is January, you hired them, and that EAD card is expiring in April. So closer to April, that card's about to expire, you have to re-verify their work authorization. That's where you complete Section 3. You may also complete Section 3, as you see here on the slide, if you rehire an employee within 3 years. We'll talk about that in the slide here in a second. And look at the last one, to update the biographical information of an employee. Maybe an employee changes their name, gets married, divorced, or just otherwise just changes their name. You can use Section 3 to take the biographical information. You may. You don't have to. But remember that word uniformity? Section 3 to update the biographical information of one employee changes their name, you better do it for everyone. Added this slide, and we added this block here into the M274 because we still had employers ask, now when we complete Section 3, what documents do we verify and when don't we have to? Look at the chart here. You have to re-verify the documents there to the right. A U.S. passport or passport card, a permanent resident card, or List B documents. As they were unexpired at the time you completed the I-9, once they do expire, you don't have to call the individual back in and complete Section 3. There are two exceptions to the permanent resident card. There it is in the middle of the slide. And as you see down at the bottom, you usually re-verify when that employment authorization list A or C has an expiration date. Now, don't fret, remember, I told you there's a customer care line number that you can pick up the phone Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with any question if you get stumped on anything. Correcting the I-9. Correct mistakes. I know employers that go, hey, if we make a mistake, we don't make any corrections. We just complete a new one. We attach that one, the old one, to it for historical files. But yes, you can make a correction to the I-9. How do you do that? The area that needs to be corrected, or maybe the item drawn through it, make correction off to the side, initial and date. That's it. No strikeovers. Hey, Casey, I want to turn this 4 into a 7, to a 7, to a 7. And everybody write this down. The trade out is never used in the same sentence as Form I-9. I'm joking there about writing it down, but remember that. Don't use that on an I-9. Correction. The item to be corrected, make the correction off the side, initial and date. Now, ask you this question. Correction, if an item needs to be corrected in Section 1, who makes that correction? Who did tell you complete Section 1? The employee. So if an item needs to be corrected in Section 1, you need to bring the employee in, have them make the correction, initial date. Why? If their employment eligibility gets called into question and someone other than the employee made a correction in Section 1, that individual could go, hey, I didn't make that. I don't know who did that. So he makes the correction. You might be wondering, well, then Dave, along the same lines, if Betty had completed Section 2 for our company for the past 5 years, Betty's no longer here, but we're doing an audit on our I-9s, and we see some items in Section 2 need to be completed. What do we do then? Anybody in the company can make a correction in Section 2, okay? But cover who should make the correction in Section 1. Cover forms at the bottom of this slide. Less than an I-9. Someone should have one. Let me give you an example. Casey started a company, let's say 4 years ago. and started a company. It's a small company. She hired 10 individuals, and here it is 4 years later. She has the same 10 individuals working for her. Nobody's quit. She hasn't hired anybody, fired anybody. Today, Casey's decided, hey, I'm going to do an audit on my I-9s. She goes to her I-9. She realizes she's missing one, and maybe that one she's missing is on me. What does she do? Okay, look back here to the slide. She calls me in and says, hey, Dave, I can't find your I-9. She has me complete Section 1 there. Excuse me, days to provide those lists of acceptable documents from that date. Look at there. Do not backdate the Form I-9. Now follow me here. She's 24 years ago. I was one of her 10 hires. Realized messing the I-9, calls me in today. Dave, find your I-9. Here, fill out Section 1. When I fill out Section 1 today, and when I sign, when I date it today. Casey those documents, and she fills out Section 2. She will date what day she saw those documents, whether maybe I had the document on me today and I showed her, or maybe it's tomorrow. She dates the real date. She doesn't have me, when I complete Section 1, backdate it to 4 years ago. Nor in Section 2, where she saw my date, backdate her date to 4 years ago. But there in that block where she certifies the day I began working for pay, she's going to put the true date that started working for pay 4 years ago. You might, now hold on, Dave. You completed the I-9 on that missing off form for Casey today, and you dated it today, and she saw your documents say today, and she dates it today, but on says you started work 4 years ago. She's going to hand slap during an audit, because that's more than 3 business days after you started working for pay that you and her completed the I-9. You know what? You're right. But if you're caught backdating the form, you're in serious trouble, big trouble. These auditors do this for a living. In an area, this would be an easy one for them to catch. Why? Because this version of the I-9 wasn't in existence 4 years ago. So very, very careful with that. Let's look at some storage and retention, and then we'll wind down with some resources real quick. Storage. Make sure you have an I-9 on file for all your employees. Store where you want, on-site, off-site. But if you get a notice for inspection, you need to be able to provide those I-9s within 3 days. We recommend, if you're making copies of I-9, that you store items together, and make sure only authorized individuals have access to the I-9s. I know none of you put them in a 3-inch binder and put them in the lunchroom, do you? Okay, attention. How long do you retain the I-9? Individual's no longer working for you. Because if an individual is still working for you, you have to retain the I-9, right? But once they're gone, how long do you retain it? Look up there. The date you hired an individual, or 1 year after the date the terminated, whichever is latter. That's all. Look at the example below, though. So November 1st, 93, and Casey fired him on July 5th, 94. So retain that I-9 for her. She takes a look at the date he was hired, meaning the day he started working for pay there on I-9. She adds 3 years to that date and comes up with that date, put that date off to the side. Takes the date she fired him, add 1 year to put that date off to the side. Whichever those 2 dates are latter, that's your retention date. That's how long you need to retain the I-9. Retain the I-9 anywhere you want. You have a file that's just retention I-9s. Maybe you keep them in full with your regular I-9s. You may, once that retention date is come and gone, what do you do with that I-9 at that time? The M274 doesn't tell you that. All it tells you is you must maintain that I-9 for retention purposes up to that retention date. Let me take my fill hat off. Why want to keep it past that retention date? Maybe she'll have back on. Make it up to that retention date. Which afterward is your business. All right, down with some resources. I-9 Central. We've talked about your one-stop shop, available in English and Spanish, everything on the I-9. Here's resources for you as well. Remember, you're going to get a copy of this PowerPoint. Some multimedia resources. If you go to our I-9 Central site, here within the past year and a half, we added what we call vignettes. I'm a good old country retired Army boy from West Virginia, and vignettes a big word for me. I like to call them lunch bag sessions. 3-minute clips. Hey, how did Dave say we complete Section 1? Clip on that. One vignette. Section 3, click on that, 2 or 3 minute segment. Look down at the bottom, the I-9 webinar on demand. You can click on that. It's a webinar on the I-9. It's about 22, 23 minutes long. If you click on that, you don't have to listen to the whole thing. It starts, it'll tell you what's in each section. You can go right there and start listening to that. Hey, it's great for a refresher or what I like to call sustain or maintain training. Hey, I'm one of about a dozen that are in the outreach section within USCIS that speak to the I-9 and E-Verify. So if you're interested in us speaking free at your conference, a state conference, a chapter meeting, all you have to do is reach out to us. We'll be more than glad to discuss that with you. Service, I talked about this customer service number throughout the session. Look at the employer hotline number right up top, 888-464-4218. Any question, I-9 E-Verify, Monday, Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, just a basic disclaimer, this session was simply meant as an informational and instructional session on the I-9. I hope it was beneficial. I see we have a couple minutes left for some questions, so without tying up talking about anything else, hey, let's turn it back over to Casey and we can address some of these Q&As. Thanks. Back to you, Casey.
I have quite a few questions. How do you update the I-9 if an employee's citizenship status has changed?
Say that, how would you update the I-9, excuse me?
If the employee's citizenship status has changed.
Okay, you don't need to update the I-9 if their citizenship has changed. Only if you need to complete Section 3 if they're like their EAD or their card expired, okay? So if they change their status, you don't need to update it. Great question. Excellent.
Employee hired prior to November 6, 1986. I'm an employee prior to November 6, 1986. But have now become a federal contractor and have to use E-Verify. Do I have that employee fill out the I-9 so that I can complete the E-Verify?
That's a great question. But you know what? With E-Verify, for the with E-Verify, you know, E-Verify all starts with the I-9 being completed. So if that individual was before that date, you wouldn't have an I-9 on them. Therefore, you wouldn't have to worry about them with E-Verify. Once again, they're grandfathered in. Great question.
Is there E-Verify specific training that is required for employers to use that service, and if there is that located?
Yeah, we don't have, it's not required training, if you will. You can go on our website. I am providing this webinar, which is an I-9 webinar, for Direct Employer Association, for direct employers. I like to call this a customized webinar, but you know, it's the same, pretty much same webinar that we conduct about 30 webinars each month. You can go to our public website, and you see right here on the slide I have, you see the E-Verify website there? If you go to that E-Verify website and then click on webinars off to the left, you'll see about 30 webinars we hold each month, different days and times on the I-9 E-Verify. You can click on that E-Verify. It's a webinar. It'll assist you with that. So don't call it training that you have to attend that and verify. But once you do run an E-Verify, you take a tutorial. You're going to need to read the manual and attend the webinar so you have a feeling for it before you start using it, okay?
Paper I-9 form completed for an employee and require reverification. We now use the electronic I-9 form managed by a third party. Is it okay to complete Section 3 via the electronic format?
Most definitely, and you just need to work with whatever electronic company that you're working with to make sure getting everything up. You know, they may want a copy of that, etc. But yeah, if you've transferred over to an electronic format, that's not a problem to complete Section 3. Run into an issue where you need to complete Section 3. Back to you.
We have time for one more. We have discovered that many I-9 forms were completed on expired I-9 forms. Is that recommended that we have these employees complete new I-9 forms?
Yes, you do a new I-9 form. Why? Because as you stated, you realize now during an audit that your self-audit that, oh my gosh, we've been completing the I-9s on an old version. So if you get an audit, you're going to get slapped for completing on an outdated form. What I would do is complete a new I-9 on the current version of the, attach that other one to it as historical documents to show the auditor, hey, in good faith, we did complete the I-9, but we realized it was on an old version, so we completed a new one, and that'll certainly assist you with that. Okay? Back to you, Casey.
Okay. That's all the time we have. Thank you, Dave, for hosting this great session.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you to everyone who joined us today. Please keep an eye on your inbox over the next couple of days for a follow-up email that will contain information on how to view the recording, as well as how to obtain SHRM and HRCI credit for this session. So have a great day, everyone, and thank you for joining us.